Hey guys, welcome to episode 90 of Stand Up. Joining me today, Boston Globe columnist Michael Cohen and Dr. Rick Meidell is a neonatologist out in California. I'm Pete Dominick. It's time to stand up with me right now. Hey guys, thank you very much for joining me today. As always, I appreciate it. The show is now, of course, daily, every day. I'm reaching out to the smartest people I can find in the world, in my network, or out of my network, people I've never talked to before as well, including you, longtime listener of the show. Joining me today, Dr. Rick Meidell, who has been listening to me on the radio since I started on the radio, and he used to call all the time as well. And I always loved to see Dr. Rick's name up on the screen. A really interesting guy. We had a fantastic, wide-ranging conversation. That is coming up after my conversation with Michael Cohen. I hope you are doing well, and I've been talking to a lot of folks who have been listening to the show. I've been learning a lot about you and about your life and your ideas as to what we should be discussing on the program here, and I appreciate that. If you haven't reached out, please do, and if you're not a supporter on Patreon, then please consider it, because it's the only way for me to be able to do this show every day, especially after things get back to, quote, normal. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick for a paid subscription. So, crazy few days as it always is in America with Donald Trump as the president. It's really difficult to get back, to get away from, to try to get a grasp on. And on yesterday's show, I talked to this Trump supporter for like half an hour. A lot of people got back to me about that. You overwhelmingly enjoyed that conversation. So I'm going to try to do more of it and try to find those people. If you have a Trump supporting friend or neighbor or relative that you think would talk to me, send them my way. By all means, send me an email or direct message me on Twitter and let me know who it is. And now we've got the state of Georgia. Are they opening? Are they closing? You've got the president having combat with journalists again. Are we still covering these crazy press conferences? Apparently we are, or I should say the cable news networks are going live on them still. A lot of controversy about that, whether or not that should happen. I don't think it should, if you care. And the mayor of Las Vegas needs to get away from microphones and cameras because she's not helping the Las Vegas image. So everything in America is continuing to be crazy. We are still leading the world in COVID by every measure, and it's horrible. And I hate to depress anybody, but I think that we're really far from this being over. We so badly, so eagerly want to get over the hump, flatten the curve, but there is some serious concern that this could come back if we don't get it under control with testing and with tracing, and we're nowhere near it. Also, yesterday was Earth Day. Did you celebrate Earth Day in any way? I was out walking a dog, looking at my phone like a dum-dum, and I see that the Republican Congresswoman from New York District 21, which is up near Canada, the North Country, if you will. Her name is Elise Stefanik, and she's a Republican and a big supporter of Trump. And she tweets, "Happy hashtag Earth Day. We are grateful for our beautiful natural resources in hashtag New York 21 and around the globe," which is such a loaded tweet. We're grateful for our natural resources. I mean, we're grateful because we can make a profit off of selling oil and gas and animals and crops, whatever. I mean, that's what I'm interpreting it. But more importantly, I just was so deeply angered by that tweet. This is a woman who's a huge Trump supporter, and she's saying Happy Earth Day. So I quoted her and said, "You are a congresswoman who supports the conspiracy theories of the president, who denies the climate crisis. History will shame you and your dangerous and dishonest lies. You don't deserve to represent such a beautiful part of our state." Because you know why? I'm done. I'm done being nice. I would never say anything about someone's gender or their race or these immutable characteristics that they didn't choose. I wouldn't threaten them. But this kind of thing, I can't deal with it. I don't care who you are. If you are a Trump supporter and you are spouting some environmentalist tropes, then enough. I'm coming for you. So let me know where you see that, and I am happy to unload on those people. Not like it matters. Not that I'm making a huge difference, but it feels strangely good. So you just got to call these people up. All right. Let's get to my first guest for today's show. He is an author and a journalist. He writes a column for the Boston Globe. You should also subscribe to his weekly newsletter, Truth and Consequences. Get his books. Follow him on Twitter at SpeechBoy71 from his apartment in Brooklyn, Michael Cohen. Is that what you call that? Fresh air, New York City?
Fresh air, yeah, well, closest to... Well, do you know the air pollution's way down in New York right now?
How do you know that? Like, it makes sense. It's obvious in every city that it's down, but how do you know it? Do you see
There was something in the Times yesterday about, 11 things that have changed in New York, and one of them is air pollution's way down.
Do you sense it? Do you feel it? Do you smell it? Is there anything?
Nah, I wouldn't say so.
Well, I'm taping. Your hair looks great. Looks really...
Yeah, I'm sure.
You take it for granted. I think you do. Michael Cohen is a columnist at the Boston Globe. I've already given you the whole intro. Why repeat myself? I want to talk with you about your most recent column, as always, but also your newsletter, which comes out on Thursdays. Everybody should sign up for Truth and Consequences, because in your newsletter, I feel I'm gonna try to say you contradicted your column with your newsletter. How about this? Which I'm both promoting the column and the newsletter, so it's cleverly done. Okay,
let's hear this.
So I know this is going to fail, but in your newsletter, you write, and now we've arrived at the point in this newsletter when I'm forced to say a few words about the national political figure that I would prefer to ignore, but simply cannot, the President of the United States. And in your column, which came after the newsletter, it's titled "The Incredible Shrinking President." So are we ignoring him? I mean, you're really not contradicting yourself, but I'm trying to make it more entertaining by saying that you are. Is he shrinking or is he getting bigger?
No, he's shrinking. I think the point is that I would prefer not to talk about him at all, but you have to, because not because he's doing anything to respond to the coronavirus, but because his impact is so pernicious. And, I think one of the reasons, and I wrote the column about, why I think he's become less relevant of a figure, is because, a lot of Americans just don't believe him and don't take him seriously and don't trust him. And the things he says are not honest and not correct and not true. And, from that perspective, it's just, I feel like more and more people are just tuning him out. I mean, I have stopped personally. I've stopped watching his press conferences because I can't bear to watch them anymore. It's exhausting. And there is no news value. I mean, I watched a lot of things the last 4 years I didn't want to watch, but there's no news value in these press conferences. And all they become is an opportunity for him to vent and to rant and to, talk to his supporters. And the cable news networks, all they do is just fact check and point out why he's not telling the truth. It's sort of a pointless exercise in a lot of ways. So I wish we could spend less time talking about him. I really do. Unfortunately, we can't. But having said that, I do think that a lot of Americans are tuning him out.
Is there any way to measure that? Is there any way to prove what you're saying in this column, that a lot of Americans are starting to tune him out? I mean, I know there are measurements of his social media and whether or not people are responding or liking and things like that. But how do you measure whether or not, like, the American public is starting to kind of tune him out? Because it seems like everybody says, well, I don't watch these press conferences, they're terrible, and then everybody's watching them. Of course, I know that's not true. It's just that social media misrepresents what we think.
Right. Well, I think part of it, you look at the trustworthiness numbers, and there was something in the Politico, I think this morning or yesterday, pointing out that 38% of Americans trust what he is saying in these press conferences. That's a pretty shockingly low number. And if you compare it to, for example, Anthony Fauci or CDC, their numbers are above 70%. So you're looking at a situation in which I think when you have kind of a gap between what they think about the president's words or they think about, Dr. Fauci tells me that they may be watching it, but they're not necessarily believing what he's saying or trusting what he's saying. So tuning out can be a question of just listening to him. I mean, you can watch it because it's almost like a car crash quality to it. It doesn't mean that you're actually believing what he's saying or you're taking it seriously. And I think that may be what's happening. 38% of the country say they don't trust what he says about coronavirus is a shockingly low number. Especially, it's basically his base minus a healthy, not healthy, but maybe 10% of his base having decided they don't trust him anymore.
Yeah, because it's interesting about that kind of polling. Maybe I'm sure you can cite off the cuff other better examples, but it's, do you believe or trust what President A or B is saying about this issue? And I think the one that comes to mind for me is, do you trust the Bush administration and weapons of mass destruction? And remember that kind of question being asked over and over because they were really trying to make this case. Yeah. And it was such an important thing for the American public to have to trust. Exactly. Because this is the case that they're making to go to war. This one, I can't think of an Obama one, and I don't think that's my bias. I don't think there was this kind of an issue that he dealt with. And it's not like, do you trust their general leadership? In this case, it's, do you trust the president on the virus? And it's interesting because what's to trust? It's the science. All he has to do is listen to his experts and then relay as best as he can what they're saying, or prop them up and, by the way, get the benefit of what they're saying. Really step back in a way in those press conferences. So that's why that number is shocking.
Right. It is, and I think it's partly, I think, because there's this huge disconnect between what he says in these press conferences and what people are experiencing. I'm going to write about this in my newsletter actually, and we had 45,000 deaths yesterday. By next week, we'll be over 50,000 probably. I did a little bit of research on this, and I just figured out that, on Tuesday, for example, 2,700 Americans died of COVID-19. That's more Americans that have been killed in the war in Afghanistan, which is going to be going on for 18 and a half years. I mean, this is just an extraordinary, tragedy. And the loss of life, I don't think any of us have fully processed exactly how horrific this has been, in part because, we're dealing with our own stress and our own anxiety about being at home and worrying if we're going to get it, worrying about friends and family. I mean, I think that it's hard to process it. And part of what makes it easier to process is having a president who can sort of help you through that process, help you kind of understand what's happened and provide some kind of comfort and solace. He provides none of that.
Yeah, you wrote that in your piece, and I thought that was, to me, kind of the best point that you make, and certainly the way you make it. You write, never does he offer sympathy or solace for the families of those who have died or the tens of millions who have lost their jobs. He doesn't even carry out the utilitarian responsibility of informing the public about what the federal government is doing in the face of raging crisis. Yeah, that's the most important responsibility he has, and I would argue it's the easiest in a way. In a way, it's difficult because you're talking about loss of life, difficult emotionally, and you're talking about loss of job. But that's what presidents do. Every president, every mayor, every governor, they go to a disaster area and they first recognize a loss and then they rally the troops and try to unify people. There's a playbook. It's been there for generations for leaders everywhere, right?
Yeah. I remember when the Challenger explosion happened. This is, I think, in 1983, I believe it was.
I know, January 86. I know that because I was just talking about
it.
Yeah.
86. Yeah. And, obviously, President Reagan gave this very famous speech where he memorialized I think it's 6 astronauts or 7, I can't remember the exact number, who had died. And, that was a moment that, whether you liked Reagan or not, he did, in a sense, unify the country and sort of spoke to the sense of loss that many people and shock that many people had felt. I think about Obama's response to some of the horrible school shootings, the Sandy Hook shooting and the Charleston shooting. And, every death is a tragedy, obviously, but the scale of death in this situation is so much greater. And yet the president has provided no kind of comfort to American people about this. I mean, nothing. And, obviously his greatest failing has been in not responding properly to the crisis and allowing some people to die. But I think close behind is providing no sort of outlet for people to grieve.
He has but it's clear thousands of people have analyzed this and said it over and over, because he doesn't have any empathy, much less ability to convey it. He doesn't care about anyone, and he never has, because his dad didn't, and Roy Cohn taught him not to. And we can psychoanalyze as much as we want, but he's the president of the United States. He doesn't care when people die. He just doesn't.
He doesn't care. And he doesn't know how to even. I mean, a lot of people who are sociopaths
That's not a partisan statement, by the way.
No, it's not. It's not.
I know tons of hardcore right-wing conservative people who deeply care when people die.
Yes.
They care.
Yeah. If they do.
Quality, unique. Well, not generally if the people you don't like die, but there's a lot of liberals that are like that too. It's not your political ideology that informs that. It's your life experience.
It's your psychology. It's your personal. It's your pathology. You know? And I think a lot of people who are extreme narcissists like Trump, who have sociopathic elements to their personality, are able to fake empathy. They're able to they understand that they need to sort of display empathy or compassion because that's the sort of the social norm. He doesn't understand that at all.
But he does say, you say they fake, they falsely convey it, but he'll say something like terrible, terrible thing. The problem is you don't believe he thinks it's terrible. You don't. He says it in such a way that, and it's like when you're arguing with your spouse or someone you care about, when someone apologizes, you're like, I don't believe your apology. We all know what that feels like. You don't believe him.
It's the old writer, convention about you want to show and not tell. Yes, so he says it's terrible, but he doesn't actually show that he's affected by it. And I think it's sort of, it's almost a strange thing that we haven't more focus on this. I mean, it's weird. Like I don't know if maybe I'm alone in feeling this way, and you can tell me if you feel the same way. But I think in a sense, like the loss of life, extreme loss of life, has not really. I don't think we're processing it. I don't think people are they just seem like numbers now.
You can't. I don't think that you can. It's not even like a war. If there was a war and something horrible happened, you could really process and have perspective over the loss of life or a natural disaster. I can be really affected by the loss of lives of some family in Tennessee after a tornado. And it can really bother me. I like to think I'm a very empathic person. But I then go on about my day and I'm worried about my own stuff. Or not. Now everybody is so focused inward on their job, their family. Like it's very hard to really feel the impact of the loss of life unless you yourself have lost someone and that's the main thing that you're dealing with. So
I think that's right. Yeah. I think that's right. And I personally, knock on wood, don't know anybody who has died from this. I know I have friends who have lost loved ones. I have friends who've lost parents, parents in law. I have friends who have been sick, although thankfully, all of them are alive and none of them have lost their lives. But, it's you see some of these stories about people who've died, and it's incredibly tragic. But I think there's been, and I blame myself a little bit too, there's been almost more focus on the numbers, which are horrific, than on the individuals whose lives are being lost. But part of that, I think, is the fault of the president. I just think there has not been this ability to convey, the tragedy that we're experiencing. And it's weird. I mean, yesterday, I'm sure you saw this video yesterday of Senator Mark Warner making tuna melts.
I only saw it because of your Twitter feed, and it made me laugh really hard that you were really upset by it and interested. Senator Mark Warner, Democratic Senator of Virginia, made a sandwich on video. Go ahead.
It was a tuna melt sandwich where he put the mayo on the white bread and put the tuna on top, and it was disgusting. And cheese, he put in the microwave. As a Jew, I just found it almost incomprehensible to witness what I was seeing.
Yeah, well, I don't get. As much as I consider myself honorary Jew, what's the Judaism mayonnaise?
We don't eat white bread, and we don't really eat mayonnaise.
Oh, Jews! I did not realize that about mayonnaise.
So Wonder Bread is like the epitome of being a Gentile for Jews.
Oh, why is that? Like, what bread did you? I'm fascinated by my ignorance here. I did not realize this.
We eat rye bread usually, some kind of that's a rye bread is a big thing.
Okay.
Like you ever see, I'm sure you've seen Annie Hall, the scene where he takes her to Katz's Deli and shows a pastrami on white bread with mayonnaise.
And he's horrified.
Mayonnaise. Like, you got to have you can't have mayonnaise on. So Jews in general don't eat a lot of mayonnaise. Mayonnaise, like at least for Jews, has a very like Gentile affiliation, I guess.
Got it. Yeah. Fair enough. I'm going to unpack that more in the future in a 3-hour conversation with you or some rabbinical scholar. But why did you bring that up?
Because when I was tweeting about it last night, I actually felt almost a little bit guilty, because interspersed with me joking about about Mark Warner and his tuna fish sandwich, or tuna melt sandwich, I'm tweeting about all the people who died.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I don't apologize for that, because we in a sense, like, we need an outlet because we're all under a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. But at the same time, like, it is, part of me feels almost as though we're internalizing what's happening. Many of us who've not experienced people who've died. And I don't think we're fully appreciating
I think
how horrific this has been.
Well, that point may be true, but I do want to, because there's a lot of people questioning, and it's a thoughtful discussion, their own joy, their own humor, their own good feelings during this time. And I think, in the conversation that we're having about our mental health, which you were so vulnerable about in a recent column of yours about being single, and living, not touching another adult, your daughters are there with you a lot of the time, of course, is really important. I love that piece. But you are absolutely allowed to make jokes and find the humor and levity while also, tweeting about the death, because that is your way. That's how we maintain our sanity and sense of normality. And it's important to, and I heard this, by the way, Sylvia Boorstein talking about this on Dan Harris's podcast. Great listen, everybody. But it's important to cling to those moments of levity and happiness, because they get you through the rest of the horror. Sorry to get on my soapbox, but I think it's important that we all recognize that that's okay.
I mean, I think, one of my responses to the
I
Trump...
loved your tweets about Mark Warner's, like those tweets in preparation to talk to you today. I was going through your timeline as always. Brought me a lot of joy. Seriously, like I loved it. I loved your outrage about that and that video.
It wasn't more of outrage. It was more of like a sociological perspective. Like, as I think I tweeted, one of the tweets was like, this video should be titled "The Difference Between White People and Jews," because that really explained it. I think.
Fine. Your sociological analysis, whatever you want to call it. Let me talk with you about this other really important issue of the argument that America is now having about reopening America. Of course, this is being led by the president and a lot of folks in right-wing media. It's also been, there's some big organizations, corporations that are spending money on this, kind of astroturfing it. There's NBC News has some great reporting on these guys that are just, really good on Facebook at rallying people. Yeah. How do you put into perspective kind of the intensity? I know your next column is about this, the intensity of this Reopen America movement that we see at these protests at state capitals, and the volume, the intensity and the volume. How real is it? How impactful is it? And how many people are really that upset with their leaders that they're not reopening government?
So I think, first of all, we should consider these are, I don't know, less than 10,000 people, probably a lot less.
Overall, in the aggregated all of these protests?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at like 2,000 people in Harrisburg was the high point. I think there was maybe that many in Michigan, but most places like Arizona, Denver, there have been several hundred people. And, because they are out in public acting like idiots, to be honest, that becomes a big story. And the press wants to cover it. They're not covering the 99% of Americans who are staying at home and abiding by social distance rules. I think the key thing to look at is the polling on this has not really shifted. You've got 70 to 80% of Americans who say they want to see these rules stay in place. And beyond that, even people saying they want to see rules in place even if it harms the economy. So if they ask to choose between the economy and health, they're choosing health. And so I think, that's a really important point, that most Americans think this is important, and they are adhering to the rules that have been set up, and they are not protesting, and they're not trying to go out and open their business right now because they know it's not a good idea. And I think, it's interesting that Trump has aligned himself with these people because I think he thinks it's this base of supporters, but I think it's actually a fringe of it's a minority of his base, or maybe it's a portion of his base. It's a fringe group of individuals who are doing this, and I don't really think they're going to have a lot of support for what they're doing. I think, first of all, you already seen like in Kentucky and Ohio, they had their biggest increase in COVID-19 cases after they had protests. I think you see stories all the time now, people who say this who think it was a crock, who listen to Fox News.
Yeah, I've been going down that. I've been investigating the conspiracy theories and those. I've been trying to get them to come on with me. I got one guy to come on with me to kind of unpack that because it's really fascinating.
But some of these people are actually dying from COVID-19.
Oh yeah,
I read about a guy in Ohio who made a big point about it. I don't know. This is BS. I'm biased. He's dead now. And by the way, anybody who thinks that's Darwinism or whatever, it's a horrible thing.
Well, even if you had no sympathy for people who you hated having pain, even if you didn't care at all, if people who you disagreed with vehemently and disliked and thought were dangerous died, that doesn't matter because we're not talking about that category of people. Even if that's me, I'm frankly not that worried if some idiot dies because he did something stupid, period. But let's say I have no concern about him, but he is a host. It debunks the whole libertarian philosophy in the most accurate way. You're not just harming yourself. I jokingly was saying, I hope that there's an overlap with people who hate wearing seatbelts and anti-vaxxers, because that's less harm done to me, unless of course you fly off the road into me. But the idea that they are lapping up what the president is saying, and that you have certain conservative folks talking about reopening America, I want to ask you if you think this is a false choice, because reopening America to get back to work is not a choice. If you reopen America, if I reopen my store tomorrow because I want to get back to work, I'm going to lose money because I have to pay you because you work at my store. Let's decide. It's a porn shop. And nobody's coming to buy our stuff, but I still have to pay you for your hourly wage. The point is, it's a false choice. Reopening the economy actually will make the economy worse.
And, like this thing in Georgia with Brian Kemp.
Do you agree with that? I mean, is there any other way to analyze that economically? Certain businesses might do better.
I agree with you, but it's also like, so Brian Kemp is letting hair salons reopen.
He's the governor of Georgia.
Who is an idiot. And all these places reopening. There is no way to give someone a haircut and socially distance oneself, or a tattoo, or a massage. And I mean, who the hell's going to go get a tattoo right now? Seriously. I mean, maybe somebody will, and maybe they'll get sick, and that's awful. They get sick, and awful they pass it on to somebody else. But I don't. I mean, if I own a hair salon, am I going to open up? I mean, it just seems a crazy notion. And I don't think, frankly, that Kemp would be doing this if not for the fact that Trump is pushing this opening up the economy silliness. But I just think that in general, you're right. It's not going to help the economy. The only thing to help the economy is to flatten the curve, and is to stop people from getting sick, and to be able to put in place have it basically so we have be able to manage this virus, and be able to slowly reopen so that we're not getting more people sick. I mean, I think the worst part of the pandemic that came in 1918 was the second wave, when they tried to reopen too soon, people got sick again. So it's just incredibly foolish. And it just also speaks something else, by the way. And I wrote about this too in the newsletter, like to just how Trump is like a child, right? He has no patience at all, right? He has no impulse control. And the smart thing to do would just say, let's close everything down May, June, July, and maybe by the fall, things will be we can return to somewhat normalcy. And you can run on this idea that, oh, look, we're having this rebirth. I'm not saying it's going to work, but it's certainly, that's one of the things you run on. But he's so impatient that he has to do it now, right? You have to open up today. You have to open up by Easter. Now it's May 1st. You can't wait for anything. And by doing it now, thinking it's going to help him and help the economy, it's going to make things worse, and maybe worse for him politically. I mean, there is this irony of that his efforts to ignore what's really been happening here has actually made this crisis so much worse and hurt him so much more politically than it would have had he actually dealt with it from the beginning.
Yeah, it's great analysis. It's so interesting to hear, to see him just not think about the long game. You're saying he's impatient, and I'm saying, well, that's true, but he also just doesn't think about what his words and actions today will mean. Maybe tomorrow, because he does think about tomorrow's news cycle, but at the end of the week with the economy, with foreign policy, with anything. And so let me ask you about that. I mean, last night He tweeted about closing down the borders and all immigration into the United States. And, a few days before that, he had said, I'm the president. I have complete and total authority. And a lot of times he says these things and he tweets these things. And obviously his administration is like, what? We never even talked about that. How can we even do that? But is it just a distraction, these things?
A lot of it is. I don't know if that's a distraction. I mean, I think that might be Stephen Miller's handiwork right there. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if he had his fingerprints on this one. But a lot of the stuff is a distraction. I mean, the stuff today about they're gonna shoot down Iranian
gunboats. They're gonna shoot down gunboats. Yeah.
Do we even have to go into how that's not possible to shoot down a boat? I guess he thinks it'll be like our underwater. He
doesn't. He hasn't thought about it.
Yeah, no.
Just trying to be.
But that to me was a distraction. And I think there is some element here where he's trying to, direct people's attention elsewhere. I mean, you saw this in 2018 with the whole caravans thing. I
like the reaction to these distractions, which I'm seeing a lot when he says something about the Iranian gunboats, whatever, on Twitter. It's, where are the tests? Like, it seems like his critics are staying on message. Where are the tests?
Well, it's funny. I actually think that there should be more discussion about that. I almost wonder, I agree with you, but I also think Democrats would be wise to talk about more about the test because it is the number one issue.
Yeah.
You cannot return to normalcy until you have testing. And I have to say, I also find it, I don't understand this. This has been going on for a month now, 2 months now of this shortage in testing. Why can't they fix this problem? I actually don't get it. Like, why is it so hard to fix? It's just crazy. This is literally the whole.
I think you actually wrote the column already as to why it's so hard to fix, and it's about Republicans. And I think it might be your pinned tweet as well. It's about Republicans not being able to run an organization, much less the government here. I mean, they can't. They don't have the right people, and the people that they have don't know what they're doing. I mean, it's the Ben Carson at housing and urban,
I guess that must be it. Because it is really insane that you can't get this fixed, considering how serious of an issue it is.
And they might not care that much. Might be another thing. Like, it's hard to believe, but like a lot of the political people in the government, I don't think they care about certain things enough.
I mean, I think the priority is getting the economy started again. It's not about testing.
That's what I mean. They don't care enough about it.
You can't do one without the other.
Right.
You can't, and you won't be, and that's just the bottom line. You can't.
Michael Cohen at SpeechBoy71. I hate to wrap it up, but I love talking to you. I got to sit down now and discuss abortion and politics with two con law scholars.
Good luck with that.
If you take away the issue of abortion, what does that do to the power of the religious right?
I think it pretty fundamentally weakens it.
You do. You don't think they go and find plenty of other stuff?
They might, but abortion has for 30 years been like the lodestar for the far right. And I always had this. I remember someone saying to me years ago that if the day that Roe v. Wade is overturned is the day that Democrats become the dominant political power in America, and I think that's probably true, actually.
So you agree with Eric Siegel? All right. Interesting.
I will just add, by the way, that I think that it's funny because it's unfortunate that that's the case. But I think abortion has become this issue that is like it defines the conservative right. And by the way, this is what I want to say. What I find so disturbing, like Dan Patrick in Texas, who said like
great American,
life. There's things more important than life when talking about the need to open up the economy. This is a guy who I guarantee you has supported every anti-abortion measure that's ever been proposed.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy of the pro-life movement, I don't think you can get a better example of it than how they have reacted to the COVID-19.
It's a weird thing, isn't it? It's a weird thing to think that a person would care. Oh, thank you very much. My daughter just brought me some food. That's a rarity. It's a weird thing to think that people would care, any individual, more about their business going under or their parents dying.
Because they think it's somebody else's problem.
Unless you hate your parents,
They think it's somebody else's problem. Somebody else is going to die, not me.
Do Yeah, that's
Stephen Ross, who like pushed Trump to reopen gyms, right, and pushing for that. He's not going to the gym. He doesn't give a shit.
Right.
Somebody else is going to the gym and they might die, but he's not going to die. He's just going to make more money.
Who's that?
Stephen Ross is his name. He owns all these
gyms
around the country. I forget the name of which ones he owns, but it's like they don't care about. They don't. Other people could die, not them.
Right. That's the only way I can understand it. All right, man. Thank you very much. Appreciate it as always.
Pleasure. Thank you.
There you go, Michael Cohen. I thoroughly enjoy talking to him. We do it about once a week, and I think he's definitely going to be one of my weekly guests. Who else do you want me to have on weekly? I've been putting out invitations to all kind of people, and so hopefully you'll let me know who you like. In the Zoom chat the other night, a whole bunch of people had great suggestions for weekly guests, so let me know who you'd like to hear more regularly on the show. And, of course, I always want to try to get a good mix of men, of women, ethnicities, so, find me people from – and suggest people from all kinds of different backgrounds, as long as they're good communicators and we get a wide range of ideas on these things. That's really what I'm looking for. So let me know who you like, and I will do my best to get them on. I always say we because I worked with a team for such a long time at SiriusXM, but it's me doing the whole thing. So I appreciate your support on Patreon. It means a great deal. Okay, so longtime listener and caller of the show. This guy listened to the program for as long as anybody that I can remember, and I know that because he would call from time to time, and he was always very thoughtful, and he would call in when he had something to say, and usually it was about healthcare because he is a physician, and he has been for, I think, about 30 years. He's a neonatologist. He cares for preemies and babies, newborn babies, and we had a wide-ranging conversation about a number of things, and I just love talking to so many of you. There's so many really intelligent listeners out there that are super thoughtful, many of which are experts on things. And I pride myself in finding people who are credible experts in their careers, no matter who you are, whether you are a doctor or a plumber or a teacher, and then making them good on the show, making them good on the podcast, making them media savvy, if you will. And although my conversation with Dr. Rick coming up is all over the place, he's such a brilliant guy, as you can tell, talented guy, and I really enjoyed this, and I want to keep talking to listeners and subscribers to the show, and Rick is one of them. So here now is my conversation with Dr. Rick.
Signed up for, Patreon. She watches it on her computer. I watch it on mine.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean, it's, I've always... My oldest son is a school teacher on Bainbridge Island in Washington State, and I don't want to take too much time, but this is what you are doing is something that he and I, as he's been an adult, have often talked about. He said, wouldn't it be great to sit down to lunch with all of the year's Nobel Prize winners? Just sit down with them and just have lunch and talk with them, or to sit down with the Pulitzer Prize winners or any number of people. Wouldn't you like to have lunch with them? And I remember the last time we had this conversation, I said, I know a guy. This was when you were still on Sirius, and I said, I know a guy who really gets to do that. I mean, he gets to talk and interview with more interesting people than anybody I know, and that must really be fun.
Aside from the obvious things, the idea, the possibility that when Sirius didn't renew my contract, that I was no longer going to have access or opportunity to do that was the hardest. It was really hard. But luckily, nothing's changed. I mean, all of the same people that joined me there are joining me here on the podcast, and a lot of new people that I reach out to as well. I mean, almost nobody says no. And so it's been amazing that I've been able to continue having these high-profile guests on the podcasts. And I don't know what it says about me or my network or, whatever. For whatever reason, it's working, and I'm really excited about how well it's going. I'm really gratified by that because what you're saying is true. It's the greatest thing in the world to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah. I envy you. I remember when you lost your job.
What happened to your phone, Rick?
I'm sorry. Oh,
you're like cutting out.
I'm far away. There you go. I'm trying to get a better position. I'm squirreled away in my office. And just so you know, with the COVID-19 and how it's going in California, I'm on the third team. I'm not even on the second team yet. I've been through all of the in-service training. on how to do, adult treatment and all that kind of stuff. But I've not yet been called up. I got to tell you, there were a couple of times it got close, and I was getting really nervous because I haven't taken care of an adult patient since 1978.
Can I interview you?
You may. Go right ahead.
All right. I'm recording. I've been recording.
Oh, you may. Sure.
I recorded your compliments
as well you should. And, for any number of reasons here in California, we've been fortunate. And I think we have to be, there have been some decisions made by some relatively well-informed leadership in our government that made a difference. And I think that our population is a little bit less dense than New York and even Detroit and New Orleans. And so that's been, that's helped us. We've been on a couple of days, maxed out with our regular ICU in one of the two hospitals I work at. But we've managed to the nursing staff has been pretty intact. The physician staff is okay. We're serviced by the same intensivist group, and intensivist is sort of like an adult version of me. They just take care of patients in the hospital, and they're really good at taking care of critically ill people. And our mortality rate seems to be pretty low for whatever reason that is. So yeah, go ahead.
Just so for people who don't know, Rick, I will have already given you a little intro here, but what is it that you do, and how long have you been doing it?
Well, I'm a neonatologist, which is basically a pediatrician with a little extra training, and we take care of infants. Technically, the neonatal time period is the first 28 days of life, and so you may have heard the word neonatal intensive care unit. Those are designated special areas in hospitals where we take care of either ill or premature babies or some combination thereof.
Your whole career, you've been taking care of premature or ill babies in the first few days and weeks of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, my whole medical career. I mean, I went to college and I had these dreams of, I was a reasonably good basketball player, and I had a basketball scholarship to a Division III school in Kansas, and I had a really big head till I realized it was Division III, and I wasn't going to make a living playing basketball, and I majored in physics, and I decided at the last minute I would teach. So I ended up teaching high school physics for 3 years in Kansas, of all places.
Oh, wow.
And then on a lark, I decided to go to medical school, not because I wanted to save the world or doing anything like that. I wanted to make a lot of money. To be honest with you, I went because I just said, well, I think I could do that. I mean, it wasn't like, that looks interesting. I could probably go to medical school and figure that out. And, I went to medical school. And I was already older than most of the matriculating students because I'd been out.
Right.
And then, of course, medicine is really mentoring way more than a lot of other educations, I think. And you pick out people that you want to be like. And there was a pediatrician when I went through my pediatric rotation at the University of Kansas, and I really liked him. He wore bow ties. He was really cool. And I said, well, I want to be like him. And about halfway through my medical school career, I ran out of money, and I didn't want to borrow any money. And my family didn't have any money, and they said, we can't afford to give you money. So I applied for and received what's called a health profession scholarship from the Army. And they paid me money. They paid me like a second lieutenant, gave me money to live on, and paid all my tuition. And the only thing I had to do was pay them back year for year.
Wait, did you join the service?
I did. I applied for a scholarship, and they gave it to me. I mean, they gave me a scholarship, and I said, thank you very much. I automatically became a second lieutenant in the Army. And, I had to go to 2 weeks of, basic stuff during the summer, but we were off. But it was always, associated with medicine. So my 2 weeks, would go to some, military clinic. And I also had to do 3 separate months of what we call clerkship training, which is sort of like being an intern. If you're an undergraduate and you intern, I remember when you had when you had your show on Sirius, you had interns coming in
every semester.
It's like practical experience. And I had, 3 separate months at 3 separate, Army medical centers. And I really liked the people in San Antonio, the Brooke Army Medical Center. So I applied for, and they accepted me as a resident in pediatrics. I I did 3 years of pediatric training. And then I'm now a fully trained pediatrician, but while I was in that training program, mentoring stepped in again, and I met Mel Baden, who was the Army's first neonatologist. By the way, neonatology was brand new at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it really, the story of neonatology is really kind of neat. I mean, you may know of that, the Kennedy administration was Camelot. It was completely so different from the previous, presidents. He was young, he was attractive, his wife was beautiful.
Right.
And we all know in the background there were problems, but what we saw, what I saw, and I mean, I was 10 when he was elected, and he's the first president that I really got to know. I read PT 109. He was like this unbelievable guy.
Yep. And
in 1962, they had a third child, Patrick Bouvier Kennedy, who I can remember this as it was yesterday. I was at home, I think it was a Saturday, listening to the radio. My dad had an old AM radio, and I heard that the baby was taken to, I believe, Bethesda Naval Hospital, and he was being treated for the blue baby syndrome. I mean, I'm like 12. And I'm thinking, I said, what the heck is that? I mean, what's the blue baby syndrome? The only thing I could come up with when I'm 12 was a baby in blue magic markers. Well, the blue baby syndrome was the name given to babies struggling to breathe because they couldn't get enough oxygen, so they were blue. That was the extent, pretty much, of the knowledge of that. And of course, I think 5 days later or 4 days later, the baby died. And it was a national tragedy. I remember it. It was just awful. Camelot. I mean, it was awful. That spurred an incredible effort to get pediatricians to be interested in taking care of newborns.
Really? That was the catalyst, the loss of the president's
and within 10
newborn?
years, a new specialty, I mean, it used to be called newborn medicine. In fact, the University of Chicago in the 50s had what was called the Center for Weaklings. That's what they called premature babies. And I actually have a...
I know some people that need to go there now. The guys that are carrying those guns at rallies.
Oh, absolutely. I have a set of pre-printed orders from the University of Chicago Hospital's Center of Weaklings. And order number was, admit to Center for Weaklings. Number 2 was place in 100% oxygen, temperature-controlled isolate. And order number 3, I'm not making this up, if alive at 24 hours, begin dropper feedings with mother's breast milk. I'm not kidding. They didn't do anything. They would throw this baby in an isolate, turn the oxygen up to 100%. And if you lived for the first 24 hours, like, okay, maybe we'll feed you. I mean, it was incredible. Jesus. That was the standard operating procedure in the late 50s. And there were a few people who were interested in this kind of thing. But it was the Kennedy, that little baby boy dying made, it just got in, in the imagination of the nation. And out of that, a lot more energy was put into researching what this was. And within 10 years, we had a whole new subspecialty called neonatology.
Sad that's what it took, but nonetheless, it's still really important and interesting.
It was. And then when I go to medical school in 1975, and got interested in pediatrics and started doing my pediatric residency, man, neonatology is the neatest thing since sliced bread. It is where all the fancy equipment is. It's where all the research was at. And the neonatologist at Brook was, like I said, this fellow Mel Baden. He had trained at Montreal Sick Children's, and he was just this amazing person. Really, I want to be like him. And so I applied for and got a neonatal fellowship. And in the Army, I did that at Fort Lewis at Madigan Army Medical Center in Tacoma, Washington.
So I want to ask you, you've been amazing on Facebook. A lot of people don't use Facebook much, but I see every one of your posts, and I would say that your posts you post opinions, you post some news items, you also post a lot of your original artwork, which is really exceptional. You're a very talented painter and artist.
No, come on, I'm just self-trained.
Well, whatever, it's really good. I know art.
Well, the best teacher I had in high school was Dale Stoker, who taught art. And I don't know if it was the same for you, but I was somehow chosen in junior high that I was like a smart kid, so they sent me into all the academic classes for whatever reason. I'll never know that. And so when you get to high school, you have counselors. I'm sure you did in Syracuse.
Yep.
And I remember I wanted to take art, and Miss Proudfoot was her name, was my counselor, and she was just beside herself. You can't do this. You'll not be able to go to college with this on your transcript. You can't be taking this low class. This is where all the stupid kids do. I said, I want to take art. And so I did. And this guy, Dale Stoker, was a Renaissance man. He was an amazing person. The first kind of person, I mean, I think I was 15, probably in my sophomore year. Yeah. And it's the first time I met a real Renaissance man who had interest way outside whatever he was teaching, which was art. He was a pretty good artist. And he, if you got on his good side, you got to go after school and hang out in his room, drink coffee, and talk about stuff. It was the coolest thing ever.
I love that.
So,
he made you like art and got you into it.
He made me like art. I was always
great.
fooling around and drawing and whatnot, but he made me like art. And then, I love watercolor. I do, it's easy. You get your stuff out. You can just whip stuff out really fast. And the thing I like about watercolor is that if you understand a little bit of the technique, the painting paints itself.
I don't share your love for it. It's very frustrating for me. I put that brush to the paper, and it goes all different directions. And I didn't plan for it to go. Watercolors are hard.
Dale Stoker is still living. I'll
look him
up. You can go. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, because it's on the top of my head, and you've been kind of posting some things about this, but I've been pretty obsessed lately, Rick, with, and always have been, as you know, the kind of the conspiracy theories and how unfortunately pervasive they have become. And so, what we're hearing a lot, we're hearing all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories, and you're seeing all these people out protesting, saying open the government. And there's a big overlap with anti-vaccine folks and so on. And so just, the first question is, do you think there's anybody that works in a hospital anywhere in the United States of America, from a nurse to a physician's assistant to a doctor, that buys into any of these theories, that it's not as bad, it's not as contagious, it's, all these...
Unfortunately, there are some. There are some in my hospital.
Is that right?
Yeah, there are. Oh, yeah. I suspect you could talk to anybody and find them in your hospital. There aren't very many. We have some physicians who are, just because you wish it so doesn't make it so. It's disheartening for me to see some people who think we need to be treating people with high dose zinc and high dose vitamin C and all this other nonsense. It actually is there. I don't know. I've never, my gut feeling about it, or my impression of it is it's not a large group, maybe 10%, maybe less, but they're here. Yeah.
What about the anti-vax types? Do you see any physicians like that?
There are a few. There is one. Let's see. One obstetrician comes to mind who is, I think, he either had a patient with an autistic child or may have one himself, but he's kind of off in the deep end on that kind of stuff.
How do you handle when you come across folks like that make those types of arguments, given what you do, which is saving babies?
Well, I've not been very successful. Early on, I tried to overwhelm them with facts. I have this perhaps maybe inflated idea of myself that I'm a pretty decent teacher. And, I came from a teaching background before I went to medical school. And, I understand teaching high school physics. You don't get in physics unless you're reasonably smart. So those kids were kind of easy to reach. But I'm pretty decent at teaching. And, these people aren't reachable. And I realized very quickly that I could feel my emotion get riled up. You could feel that kind of thing. I heard you on the radio with some of these people. I can see in you, hear in you, the same feeling I had in myself, was like, how come this person can't understand reality? But they can't. And I've just come to the acceptance of that I don't know how to reach them. I know there are people who said trying to reach some middle ground consensus. Tell me what makes you think this or that kind of thing. But I just don't I don't have the intestinal fortitude or the intellectual capability to meet them on their ground, because it is so, they are in a completely different world. The sky is blue and the earth is round. The sky is not pink and the earth isn't flat. I can't talk to these people.
Right. So how much are you concerned about the idea that when and if there is a vaccine for COVID-19, enough people will take it that it will matter? You know, you think about the percentage of people who get the flu vaccine, or it seems like it's getting worse, the anti-vax movement, and there's a huge overlap, unfortunately, with conservatives and Republicans that have that ideology.
I would love for someone, you know, I'm a scientist at heart. I try to think scientifically. It would be really interesting to find out a way, if we could actually interrogate that question. How many of these people are out there? Really? I mean, we do surveys and all that kind of stuff, but I want to know how pervasive this is. And that's number one. And then number two, this episode, will it change minds? I don't know. I don't have enough data to know, except for a few anecdotes where people said, yeah, maybe I should get it, immunized. But what we know about conspiracy thinking in general is that when challenged, most people who are conspiratorial in their thinking simply harden their positions.
Yeah, right. When challenged or when given the information, given the experts, I read some, about some study with climate science deniers, and they sat down with, a whole bunch of experts, climatologists, whatever, and explained it all to them, and they came away even more convinced in their conspiracies.
Oh, yeah, they are. And the unfortunate thing is, from my reading, it says that if you're conspiratorial about one thing, if you think the CIA killed John F. Kennedy, then you're a climate science denier, and you're an anti-vaccinationist, and you think the Wuhan lab, purposely let out the virus, and we're off to the races. So yeah, my son and I had a really interesting, conversation about this a week ago. I mean, he's doing remote learning with his classes. He teaches AP history. Interesting caveat: AP history. He also teaches regular history. So I asked him, "What's the difference?" He said, "The AP kids do their homework. The regular kids aren't any dumber, and the AP kids aren't necessarily any smarter. It's just the AP kids just do their homework."
It's like a work ethic thing.
Yeah, well, they have an internal motivation. They don't have to be forced. And I don't have to entertain them as much. I said, well,
the AP kids. I was
he doesn't have to entertain the AP kids as much.
That was that was in the general
they all
classes.
Talk, they all do their thing. The regular kids had to be entertained, which I can understand that.
I was one of the regular kids, and I was the entertainer.
Well,
I saw it as an audience.
Here's another thing I'll just tell you. I don't claim to be an educational revolutionist, but I will tell you a little bit about my physics class. I met a naval aviator once, and I didn't know this, but everyone, those are the guys got to land on the aircraft carrier.
Yeah, I know. I know one myself really well.
Yeah, and they call those landings traps. And the aircraft carrier's got 4 wires across the aft end, and you're supposed to catch one. Otherwise, you have to go around, or if you're really bad, you hit the aft end of the boat. That's really ruin your day. And so each one of those traps is graded, and a perfect trap, an A, is catching the 3 wire. So they're numbered from aft to forward. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be an A. A B would be a 2 wire. A C would be a 4 wire, because if you miss that one, you have to go around. And then a 1 is a D, because that's too darn close to what they call the ramp, which is a ramp strike, and nobody wants that. And so you're graded. You have a grade point average, and the grade points are posted by name, not by student number, on the air boss door. And those guys are competitive as hell. And this was back in the 70s when I was teaching, and I asked him, "So why do y'all do that?" And he said, "We don't want any C+ carrier pilots." And that stuck with me. So when I taught high school physics, I told the kids on the first day, "This is going to be the hardest class you're ever going to have, and there's only 2 grades. You can either have an A or a B." And they said, "Oh, Mr. Meidell, that's so cool." I said, "Oh, no, you have no idea what you got yourself into, because you're not getting out of here without an A or a B. Because what does it do? What good does it do to have a C in physics? What does that even say? I want you to know the stuff, right? That's the point. And of course, I had small classes, and I was lucky, and I had some motivated kids, and they either got an A or a B, and that's because I had to earn it.
The problem I have with that, though, is I didn't want to be in physics. I wasn't. I wasn't interested. They made me. Give me the class. Give me classes that I'm interested in, and I'll excel.
So you want to know what the first lesson was? You had to make a battery. Would you like to make a battery?
Well, I would now, Rick. I would now, but then I just did.
Well, I bet when you were 15, or 16, would you like to make a battery without knowing what you were doing? You start putting this thing together without even knowing what it is until somebody goes, "Hey, this looks like a battery." You think, yeah. It was a great way to teach, thermodynamics and energy and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm an expert. I'm an expert on those now. But that's now. Then I wasn't as interested. So let me then ask you about. Did you write this Facebook post, "The Empty Promise of Libertarianism"? Was that your original?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we talk about that post?
Yeah.
Because I that's another thing over the years that I have found really fascinating, just economic and political theory, of course, and nothing more than the libertarian ideology, because it captures a lot of young minds. They read. Well,
who's that guy that comes on your show? He was Reason Magazine. I'm trying to.
Yeah, Matt Welch.
Matt Welch. Well, I would like to debate him a couple of times, because some of the things he says, these caveats, I want to go, oh, excuse me. Oh, no, Mr. Welch.
Yeah, I think we could probably arrange that.
Yeah,
But tell me about this piece, the empty promise of libertarianism. What inspired it, first of all, Rick?
Well, I mean, what inspired it was Rand Paul. I mean, I remember him standing in the well of the Senate talking about how the state of Kentucky was telling him what kind of toilets to buy. And because we want low flow toilets because we need to preserve water. And most people are too dumb to make that decision. And I have low flow toilets in my house. They work fine and I save water. What's the problem? And he went on and on about that. And I thought, that's just stupid, especially in a pandemic. And he was the guy who was the first senator, by the way, to get infected. And he was not socially responsible in that. And so then I remember his speech, and then I got.
Oh, he knew he was exposed, and he was hanging out close to other senators. As a matter of fact,
he was. Yeah, he was being a libertarian.
And as a physician, especially, he should know better. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, he just should know better. I mean, I think that people go back to the revolution and they look at our founders, and they were talking about liberty and whatnot. What those guys were really pissed at was the king. They weren't into libertarianism, one man being God, that they weren't all Daniel Boone. None of them were that. They all lived communitarian lives. They understood that. So, the big thing about our revolution was to throw off the king, not to become individual liberty.
You wrote, I really like the sentence. You wrote, "We are successful because we are excellent at cooperating." Humans, you write, are not libertarian. We are communitarian. We excel when in a community of other humans. I like that because it uses the words that you chose to use. It doesn't get so caught up on economic theory. It's just more about human behavior, and how human beings have been successful over the history of our civilization is that we've been working together, not as individuals.
Yeah, you said it. We were pretty crappy hunters, and we didn't run very fast. We had pretty decent arm strength, and we walked upright so we could see things, but we were shitty hunters. We weren't nearly as good as cheetahs, right? We had to cooperate to bring down game. We had to cooperate to find the right grubs and whatnot. It was cooperation that made us take over the world, not because we're libertarians. That's just nonsense.
Well, you had this line in this post, which I was just really marveling at, and I keep meaning to quote here on the show or on other social media, and of course give you credit. But you wrote, "Some are quick to say there are no atheists in foxholes. I say there are no libertarians in pandemics."
Absolutely.
Love it.
Can't be. Well, there can't be. You're right. I mean, I don't.
Because it is what you mean, because it's contagious.
Exactly. And the only way, I mean, this whole thing has to be communitarian. You can probably talk with Aaron Carroll about this, but it's an amazing feat of international cooperation getting each year's influenza vaccine. The reason that we have members of our CDC in the Chinese CDC and in that part of the world is most influenza comes out of birds in that part of the world. We start working on next year's influenza vaccine in the autumn of 18 months earlier. We start to look, what looks like the influenza virus, which is going to come out. And so they get together. There's lots of people, probably 50 countries are cooperating with the World Health Organization to get an idea and to make what's really an educated guess, but very educated, as to what's the influenza strain that looks like it's going to come out. And then we have to go to the manufacturer. We start making the flu vaccine. Probably about now, we are beginning to manufacture the flu vaccine for next fall to start giving to people and we were investigating last autumn in parts of the world where the bird flu comes out, because that's natural reservoir. Right. But it's an amazing communitarian event. Lots of countries add expertise to that, and they quietly go about their business. And that's how we're going to solve this problem, in a communitarian way. We can't do it with libertarians.
Do you have a theory as to why the American public, too many folks in America have lost faith in expertise, institutions, academics?
Well, actually,
journalism?
I'm reading a book right now that it's a bit dense, but it's written by a neurobiologist at University of California, Irvine, and it's called "The Case Against Reality." Subtitle, Donald Hoffman is his name. Why evolution hid the truth from our eyes. And his hypothesis is that our brains evolved to give us a survival advantage, not necessarily to interrogate reality, right? And that's why, we know that eyewitnesses are notoriously, incorrect. There was an automobile accident and you get 9 people, and one person said it was a green convertible that ran into a pink pickup truck. Oh no, it was 2 pickup trucks, and nobody has it right. And that's because we have this instantaneous ability to take a memory that we've built in our brain like a DVD and plug it in and play it when an event occurs. And we do that so we can think fast in that amygdala part of our brain that Barry Ritholtz likes to talk about. And we make a snap decision. Most of our recollection of events are pieced together from many recollections from many separate events, and we put it into a picture, and we think that's what happened. And that's not reality. Science, on the other hand, forces you to slow down and stop and look and be willing to be wrong. There's a reason science and math are hard. How many times do you read a book written for lay people and they start out by saying, now we know science is hard. We're not going to get you we're not going to put a bunch of equations in here. We're not going to get too sciencey, but we want to try to tell you this. The reason it's hard is because our brains aren't manufactured. They didn't evolve to think scientifically. You have to force yourself to think scientifically.
Right.
Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize winning physicist too. I actually heard him speak, and he was at Caltech up here in Pasadena. Once famously said, "I'm not afraid of not knowing." It's when you don't know that ought to get the excitement going. You want to find out, but I'm not afraid of not knowing.
Oh yeah, I mean, that certainly does resonate with me. It's what drives me to get up every day to do my show.
But if you think about good science, look at Dr. Fauci and how humble he is, and how he's even he couches things. Everybody's all the media is saying he's probably trying to not get Trump on his bad side. Maybe, but he's also being a really good scientist. We couch our statements in, well, I'm not sure, but it sort of looks like we need some more information, but I'm not quite sure. But the data begin to point this way. We are taught to be very careful in the pronouncements that we make. Unlike pseudoscientists and people who, and Donald Trumps and all those kind of people, and, conspiracy theorists who are convinced they're right. Science begins with a question and tries to answer it. Pseudoscience starts with an answer and tries to prove it, and that's just wrong.
Well said. So let me ask you one more question, which is your outlook on things, your ability to look at just the regular journalism. It would be better and more equipped to react to than mine, as well as obviously your ability to look at medicine and understand our healthcare system, which you and I have talked to over the years a lot about the criticisms of the healthcare system. When you look at it holistically, this epidemic and what it's done to us, to this country. Well, my question is about the future. How do you see the next 3 months playing out with this epidemic?
I'll start with a quote by Winston Churchill. Churchill, when Britain was fighting and America was not yet in the war, he said in the House of Commons once that, well, the Americans usually do the right thing, but only after they've tried everything else first. We've been pretty successful in this country. As the sweep of history would say that we've been pretty successful. We've really done some stupid things, but we've been generally successful. And reality has a way of coming around and biting you in the ass. And in a way, I'm hoping 2020 is just like 1932. In 1932, the shit hit the fan, and FDR, a very pragmatic person, said, I don't know what to do, but we're going to try some shit. I don't know that I'm right or wrong, but we're going to try stuff. I'm going to get the smartest people around me that I can find and listen to them. If they give me some advice that doesn't work, we'll try something else. And he was confident that doing that would find a solution. And if you think about our greatest presidents, they've been pragmatists. Pragmatism is something lost on America lately.
Yeah.
But it's there. It is there in our people. And, FDR was nothing but a pragmatist. He didn't come with ideology, except that he thought he ought to help as many people as he could. I mean, his private writings say that, even before he was president. The same with Lincoln, who was also a pragmatist. I mean, the only ideology he brought was he was sort of anti-slave. He didn't think it was a good idea that people owned other people. He didn't have any idea how we were going to rid ourselves of it. But when he ran for Senate, and he didn't want to open up the Western lands for slavery.
Lincoln?
And when he ran against, when Lincoln against Stephen Douglas, he lost that race for Senate. But those debates were when he was running against Stephen Douglas, he lost. But he made his point that he was anti-slave. He didn't want to continue to expand slave-holding states. He didn't know how we were going to do it. And then, of course, he becomes president. And the only thing he really wanted to do was hold the Union together. And he didn't really know how to do that. But he kept trying. He kept looking for a general who'd fight. I got to find something that'll work. If you read Doris Kearns Goodwin's Team of Rivals, it's an amazing thing. Right. He was an amazing pragmatist. So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the only thing Kennedy wanted was the missiles out of Cuba. He didn't give a damn how they got out. We want these out. I'm looking for solutions. Can we find some? There was no ideology there. None. I think that's lost. It exists in America in a lot of places.
Sure.
The punditry, you don't make money being a pragmatist if you're a pundit. You have to yell and scream.
You got to burn. You got to burn another argument down and have your argument.
Yeah.
And that's
conflict
the name of the game.
sells razors. But I am 63% optimistic that we have more smart people than we have dumb people, I think that this, one of the things.
Well, how many does it take to create herd immunity?
Well, 90%, most people say. Well, and there's questions about this that we have to have answers for. Number one, if you have this infection, does it mean that we don't even know about it? Is it like chickenpox? Because if you get chickenpox, you have pretty much lifelong immunity to chickenpox. If you get measles, you're not going to get it twice, pretty much. But we don't know about coronaviruses. There are RNA viruses versus DNA viruses. Those kind of things are different. And by the way, an RNA virus would not be a virus you would choose to use as a bioweapon, because RNA viruses mutate too much. So you could.
A really interesting way to debunk that conspiracy theory.
Yeah, why was everybody excited about smallpox? The smallpox, virus stays the same. So if you build it as a bioweapon, it ain't going to change after you've set it out there. It's bad form to have it mutate, not be good. That's stupid. So RNA viruses don't make a very good virus for a bioweapon anyway.
Well, getting back to my question about looking down the road, I mean, it's interesting to talk about history and leadership and pragmatism in terms of FDR to JFK to Lincoln. But we have a game show host as president who cares about nobody and nothing but himself. So how do you see, if the federal government is being run by a madman, then how do we get through this problem when we have no pragmatists in the executive branch?
Well, I used to not like federalism. I mean, I think we need a national healthcare system, and I don't think we need, 50 different healthcare systems.
Right.
But in this particular instance, federalism is kind of saving our crock here. I mean, New York's not going to put up with his bullshit. And Andrew Cuomo is showing the world how to do it. So is Jay Inslee. So is Polis in Colorado.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are saying, no, no, you're doing it wrong. This is how we're going to do it. And, I think that federalism is helpful a little bit in this regard. Where it's not helpful is that we can't have it. We need a unified response. I mean, we just need to. I mean, and I don't know how we get that. I mean, in previous times, I mean, there was Father Coughlin who had a radio show, but there was nothing like Fox News in the 1930s and 40s. There was nothing like that. And I don't know how much of a handicap that is for us, but I'm still 63% optimistic. I think we will get a vaccine. The majority of Americans will go, wow, those doctors and nurses are really good. I think one of the best pictures that I don't know if you saw, I posted a picture of that nurse standing in front of the crazy lady in Denver. Yeah. And superimposed over, that's the Declaration of Geneva, which is the modern Hippocratic Oath. And it is used for it's not just doctors, it's anybody in healthcare. And I think that whole thing is really backfired. I think that, you don't get out of your car and yell at a nurse. You just don't do that. Nurses
we've created a lot of sympathy for a lot of people that always deserved it, but what didn't get it.
That lady's obviously over 65. She's probably retired. They're driving a $40,000 truck with really nice wheels. She's probably not missing any meals. I'm looking at her going, yeah, you're really not hurting here.
Yeah, that's probably not fair to make those assumptions, Rick, but I'm fully with you.
Well, I did.
Could it be somebody? Could be a friend's car, and maybe she's really desperate to get out of the house.
I didn't publish that, but between you and me, that's what I.
Well, I am recording and posting this entire conversation, which is, and I got to wrap it to make sure I can do that by tomorrow. But I wanted to just say on the record here, you have been listening to my radio show at SiriusXM for as long as anybody that I can remember, and calling in from time to time, never enough as far as I'm concerned, because every time I saw your name up there, Dr. Rick, I wanted to get to you as quickly as I could. I greatly appreciate the fact that someone as thoughtful and as intelligent and as experienced as you would enjoy the show and get something from it. But I always got a lot more out of my conversations, including this one, from you than you did from me. And so I appreciate all of your time listening to the show and what I would call your friendship.
Oh, absolutely.
Your friendship.
Oh, absolutely. I would tell you that my older son and I, even my younger son lives in Indianapolis. He's an engineer. We would, when this is all over, we would love to take you out to lunch.
Dinner.
We would love dinner, whatever.
I upgraded it.
All right.
Yeah, at a resort.
Wherever. Well,
in the Bahamas.
Someplace equidistant between Washington State, California, and
Bermuda,
and New York.
I think is that place.
Well, we in the halfway points to Indianapolis, where my younger son lives. So then we can invite Aaron Carroll, and we'll
do that. That would be a great joy for me to have a meal with you. It really would. So
thank you. It's been a pleasurable 42 minutes and 51 seconds. You take care.
Thank you so much, Rick, and I'll be in touch.
Why don't you private message me your address, and I'll send you a painting.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, what do you like?
I like anything nature. I like your birds a lot.
Oh yeah, okay.
I really like your birds.
I'll rustle up something. Okay.
I collect bird art.
Just PM me your address.
I will listen to you with the PM language. All right, Rick. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Dr. Rick Meidell, how about that? Who is the next listener, subscriber that I will call? I love talking to you guys. There's so many smart, thoughtful, amazing, kind, generous, hilarious people out there listening, and I love getting to know you, and you have a lot to offer. And guess what? You're not alone. We're not alone. Thank you so much for joining me on today's show, for listening to the program, and for all of your contributions, suggestions, and ideas. Sign up right now for a paid subscription for as little as $5 at patreon.com/Pete Dominick. I hope you're hanging in there. I love hearing from you. If you've never emailed me or contacted me and you're listening to the show and you're still listening right here at the end of the show, then do it. Today's the day. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com or on Twitter @Pete Dominick. And I look forward to hearing from you and perhaps talking with you right here on the show or off the show. Either way, look forward to getting to know you. Thanks for getting to know me and all of the smart, thoughtful people that I'm talking to. I'll talk to you later, tomorrow, right here on Stand Up.